right. Hello and welcome to Plate and Palate with Megan and Abby. I'm Abby Gardner, owner of Abby Cooks Wild, a full-service meal prep delivery service based here in Denver, Colorado. And with me on the other side of the screen is the amazing Megan McGee.
Hi, everybody. I am Megan McGee. I am owner of Nourish Nutrition Consulting. I specialize in working with clients who have any health changes, especially chronic health changes, things like autoimmune conditions or big health diagnoses.
So today, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, but we are going to dig into blood work and what you should be looking for, what questions you should be asking, and what really is important to pay attention to. Is that a good?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the reason we're having this conversation is because many years ago, I went and had some blood work done as part of a regular medical routine. I went to my general practitioner and they did the normal everything, the blood work, the reflexes, everything that they do. And my blood work came back. My doctor called me and said, Abby, your cholesterol is high and we need to put you on a statin. And at the time, I was in my mid-40s. I had two little kids. And I was like, hell to the no on that. Thank you very much. I'm not going to go on a statin. And proceeded to contact you, Megan. And I said, what's going on? And the rest is kind of history because we discovered together that this wasn't a function of my heart not being well. And I do want to add an aside to this. My father passed away. He had a cardiac arrest as the result of some really funky, weird condition called a cardiac amyloidosis. And so that when the doctor said cholesterol and it threw me into, oh my gosh, I'm going to have the same thing my dad had.
Yeah.
Which is not the case. I was a woman in my mid-40s and perimenopause had started. So I'm so grateful that I had the wherewithal to say, I'm not going on a statin until I really understand why my cholesterol is high. And you helped me with that. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So I want to segue into cholesterol. Let's just start with that because everybody knows cholesterol is a big, big thing. Everybody's like, oh, you have to know your numbers, know your numbers. So cholesterol, the standard, right? I have my blood work here actually from that very conversation we had. So the range for cholesterol for total cholesterol at that time was 100 to 199. And mine was well over 200. I won't give the exact number, but share with us what those ranges really mean.
Yeah.
And share like they're changing constantly.
Yeah. This is such a great conversation. And I love the idea of let's test, not guess. As I work with clients, I regularly advocate to look at blood work. I believe blood work is our roadmap to what's going on in our bodies. What I also see on a regular basis is that we're not doing enough blood work. Our evaluation for a standard well workup is minimal. It's basic. We're not getting enough information. I regularly have clients say to me, Megan, I had, my annual exam. I'll send you my labs and it is a lipid panel. That doesn't give us enough information. And it's kind of almost the standard, right? We checked the cholesterol. It's a fraction of what we need to know. Within that, when I think of a blood report, things to know, and you started to allude to this, Abby, you're right. the reference ranges are constantly changing. On a regular basis, the labs recalibrate those ranges based on standard American population. It's not standardized. I look at lab reports day in and day out. This person's lab ranges are this. This person's lab ranges are this, right? So our ranges are getting wider and wider. More of us are falling in the norm, but that doesn't mean that our health is optimal. And that's a very big distinction. Just because our marker is in the range, there is a different interpretation there. I want to make sure someone's health is optimal, not average or adequate. Again, just because we fall in the norm doesn't mean our health is optimal. It's a different interpretation. Our doctors are typically looking for disease or pathology when they look at labs. And yes, good. Let's make sure there isn't true disease. But I think for most of us, yes, we want disease prevention or protection, but more often I think most of us are looking to maintain our health and have optimal health, not just, do I have a diagnosis, right? How do I stay healthy? How do I prevent disease, right? The other thing to know is that on a lab report, it does say reference range. And the general conversation is that those ranges are now suggested. What does that even
So
mean?
it just muddies the water.
Yeah, just muddies the water. Yeah. With lipids and cholesterol, typically we're going to look at a total cholesterol, an LDL, which is one form of bad cholesterol, HDL, which is the good cholesterol. We want that number high because it's the protective cholesterol. And we're going to look at triglycerides. A total cholesterol, and Abby, you were alluding to this. Again, I want it under 200. Where under 200, I'm not super particular, but I really want it under 200. But there's such a bigger conversation there. It's not black and white. Oh, your total cholesterol is elevated, so we need to start a medication. There are so many other factors involved. That's where I think we're missing the boat. If we only check a lipid panel and we're not looking at the whole body, if you will, we're missing out.
Yeah. So what are some areas that you think are tests that maybe MDs are not paying enough attention to, so that when we go to the doctor and they say we're going to run blood work, you can advocate for yourself and say, hey, while you're doing that, will you please add on X?
Right. Such a great question. Such a great question. I'll share with you some of my favorite markers that I think are really important to have a better comprehensive evaluation. Here's things to know. Some of the conversation comes down to what the insurance company will cover. And I do respect that. I don't want you to walk away with $1,000 bill because you had extra blood work done. So please, by all means, you need to make good decisions. But we also know insurance is really about sick care and not well care. Many of us probably need to be considering doing labs in other ways. And even if that's a 9 Health news fair where you are paying a little money, but you also know ahead of time, there's lots of ways to get cash rate labs that are very reasonable. Just as an example, I recently had a client go to his doctor because I gave him a list of labs, and the doctor said, you know, I can only run these. You're going to have to pay for these. It was going to be an $1,100 bill. He came back to me and he's like, Megan, I can't run these labs. And I was like, I have cash rates. It's $250. He's like, the doctor told me it's $1,100. I'm like, I know, because they were going to run it through insurance and you were going to get a big bill. So my point of that is, number one, explore, ask questions, right? Blood work can be, I mean, you're going to invest some money, but it's investing in evaluating your health. I don't think that's wrong. but there's cash rate options out there that are very reasonable that you don't end up with $1,000 bill. So that's the first piece. The second piece, yeah, there are some markers I feel very strong about looking at. So the first one is vitamin D. All of the research I look at, and remember, I focus on working with sick people. My clients have autoimmune conditions, they have chronic illness, right? So vitamin D is considered a master hormone. It has a role in nearly every metabolic activity that the body goes through. The majority of us are deficient in vitamin D because we get vitamin D from going outside in the sunshine, but we need to be outside in the sun for like a minimum of 15, 20 minutes, fully exposed, as in our birthday suits. And none of us are doing that. And, here in Colorado, for example, in the wintertime, we go outside, but we've got the jackets on, the gloves, the hats, the scarves, we're bundled. And the summer we go outside, but as soon as you put the sunblock on, you're not absorbing. Vitamin D is a big one. I really like to look at B12, for example. That's really important for stress and energy. In 2024, we are all under chronic stress. One of the biggest complaints I hear from clients is, I am tired. Yeah, I want to look at those B vitamins. We need them for stress and energy, especially B12. I am very emphatic around looking at blood sugar. Blood sugar is one of the biggest reasons that we can be having inflammation. And inflammation is the underlying component of any health change. When I say blood sugar, I want to look at a glucose, that's your blood sugar in the moment. I want to look at a hemoglobin A1C, which is your 3-month average. Many doctors do not check that. And by the way, you can have a normal glucose, because glucose is just in that moment. And you can have an abnormal hemoglobin A1C. I see it all the time. The third marker I really think is so important in this day and age is looking at insulin. It's kind of the trifecta. I want to look at those all together to get a true interpretation. Most practitioners are not checking insulin. It is not a standard marker. In my mind, it needs to be. I see so much insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is different than diabetes. How we treat it is also different. And being in a culture right now where all of a sudden there's such a buzz around the weight loss medications, that's a whole other conversation, but we need to know what's happening with blood sugar. Part of why maybe someone's struggling to lose weight is they're insulin resistant and nobody's talking about it. I want to check thyroid. Most practitioners, if they check thyroid, they only check TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. That's what your pituitary gland secretes. Yes, I want to know your TSH. That we have a gland to gland conversation around thyroid. The pituitary gland talks to the thyroid. So your TSH is only one marker. What's happening at the thyroid level, T4 and T3? For many of my clients, I also want to rule out the antibodies and make sure somebody doesn't have Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune thyroid condition. It's rampant. I see it all the time. It can also be a huge factor of why we don't feel good. And then from there, I target based on my client and what their health goals are, maybe where they are in stage of life. So for example, if a client is menopausal, if a client is in fertility years and is having trouble getting pregnant, right? So some of the conditions, then I lean in from there. But those are some of my favorite markers to look at that I really feel are very important, and I think can give us a lot more information of why we're struggling to feel good and maybe why we also have health changes going on.
Yeah. Okay. So if I go back to the GP, actually, I won't go back to him. I fired him long ago. But next time I go for blood work, do I need to make the request that they look for these things as
Yes.
kind of like a standard?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about lab recommendations in that way. So if you have questions about what labs you think you need for you, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to set up a phone call in that way.
Okay.
But just that we have to advocate for ourselves.
Yeah.
But we also
Yeah.
need to know what we're asking for and why we're asking for it. And again, whenever I work with a new client, I always ask for them to send me their blood work ahead so I can take a peek. I see it day in and day out. My clients say to me over and over, oh yeah, I just had my well check in the last year. I have blood work. And I get it.
Yeah.
And it's maybe a CBC and a lipid panel. It's not enough information, especially if somebody doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Which is why they are going to the doctor anyway, unless they're there for their annual
Right, right,
check.
right. But I think, and the annual, I mean, by all means, go for your annual physical, absolutely. And again, because of how I practice, I see a lot of sick clients. And my sick clients are going for their annual exam, trying to get information. And again, it's the CBC and a lipid panel, and that's nothing to evaluate based on what the symptoms are. That's really, I think, where we could do a better job. I'm presenting with all of these symptoms. Let's look at what the underlying cause might be. And I'm not saying to necessarily go on a rabbit hunt. That's not what I'm trying to imply. But if someone's really struggling with fatigue, let's not just tell them they're depressed and here's an antidepressant. I hear that a lot too. Let's try to rule out why someone might have fatigue.
Yeah.
And at least rule out.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of digging deeper and having more information, because knowledge is truly power when it comes to your health.
Yeah.
So, and that's why we're doing that's why we're having these conversations and sharing them with everybody. So thank you so, so much for sharing the wealth of information and knowledge that you have. And I am definitely, I've been taking notes. I'm definitely going to be asking those questions next time I go to the GP.
That's
So,
great. Yeah, thank you. This
yeah.
is one of my favorite conversations, Abby. I'm so glad that you suggested this idea and that we've had some
Yeah.
time to talk it through. Um, Again, we all need to be advocating for ourselves and our health. We need to be asking questions.
Yeah.
As a layperson, sometimes it's hard to know what to ask for because that's just it. We don't know what to ask for,
Right.
right? But I believe, again, blood work is the roadmap to what our bodies need.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just necessarily band-aid a situation either. Oh, you have high cholesterol, here's your statin, but really you have high cholesterol because you have prediabetes or insulin resistant, or you're super inflamed, or your liver is sluggish, or X, Y, and Z, your hormones are imbalanced, you have a thyroid issue. There's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
That's where we need some expertise and some support of looking at things different and looking at things from, again, a more holistic approach in the sense of let's figure out why. And we have to be real that our stress is a huge factor of what's impacting us. And we can't ignore that. Our stress directly changes our hormones, our labs, what's going on in the body. And again, I think there's a bigger conversation or an exploration of how do I evaluate my body today? And my body today is different than my body in 10 years from now. So great conversation, Abby. And yeah, thanks for asking all these good
Of
questions.
course. Yeah. So we will wrap it up, I guess, for today, and we will
Sounds
see
good.
you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.